Hello, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about flexibility and learning from past experiences. I think that flexibility, or the ability to adapt, is generally one of the best skills or character traits to be able to learn, not only because it's highly important in itself, but also because it can help you to learn other skills as well. So with that said, let's crack into it. All right, so we're going to start off by talking about an essential feature of life, and that is change, right? Change is an inescapable part of our existence. Even if you decide to live in the same town your entire life, you are going to grow up, and many different things about you as a person and what is demanded of you and what you need are going to change as you go through. So when you're a baby, you're obviously very, very dependent on everyone else for everything. But as you grow older, you don't have the same needs anymore. When you become a teenager, you have new needs. You're more independent, but you have new needs such as the need to, say, socialize or the need to find some kind of fulfillment in what you do. And these needs change as you go through. But not only do your needs change, the world also demands different things of you at different points, right? So as you grow older, you gain more personal responsibility and you may start a job, you may start a family, and these things are going to require that you essentially do stuff for other people, right? The point is that change is an inevitability. But not only does change take place on a personal level, we also live in a world in which itself is changing rapidly. This is especially prescient in areas such as technology, where every year certain new types of technology can replace the old ones and things become outdated very quickly. And it's this sort of thing that is going to be quite important for people who have careers in these sort of ever-changing, rapidly changing areas. You also may have to move to a new city, or you may graduate from school, go to university, graduate from university, go to a new job. You may start a new relationship or end one. And for the most part, it's pretty inescapable. So being able to adapt and accommodate for these changes in situation is, in my opinion, an invaluable life skill. Most of the changes that I've talked about so far are somewhat predictable, but there are probably also going to be unexpected challenges that emerge for you seemingly out of the blue. So this can happen where you move to a new city and all of a sudden there's some new factor which you hadn't really thought about previously. It could also happen when you graduate out of university and get your first proper job. You might encounter things which you just simply weren't aware of before, and being flexible and being able to adapt to accommodate these changes is, again, really important. Or it may happen in your health. So as you get older, people develop different kinds of health issues which require adaptation. Even if you live a very sort of monotonous lifestyle and do the same sort of thing day in and day out, eventually you will get old and you will start to have to do things a little bit differently to accommodate for the decrease in energy. But the good news is that people are able to adapt and able to change, right? Not only does change take place naturally, as I said before, but we can also enact change in ourselves. And this is where the idea of neuroplasticity comes in. Neuroplasticity is the idea that essentially the brain can change itself. So one way in which this can happen is through deliberate practice. When you perform a certain type of activity, certain neurons in your brain and neural pathways in your brain get fired. But the more that these get fired, the more they become insulated with a substance called myelin. And there's a great book about this called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. I listened to the audiobook about 2 or 3 years ago, and it was just a really great thing to listen to. What this means is that even if you're presented with some new kind of challenge or some kind of new way of doing things, you can, through practice, change your brain such that you're better at doing it. This is one reason to not necessarily think, oh, I could never be good at X, or oh, I could never be good at Y, because maybe you could be a lot better than you're giving yourself credit for if you applied yourself over the longer term. Another side to this that I wanted to talk about is the idea that exercises which do things like train your concentration, ways of boosting willpower, ways of increasing your discipline, all these kinds of meta-level activities and approaches to things can help you to adapt more quickly as well. Because if you, for example, have more concentration, you'll be able to pick up a new skill more quickly than if your attention was more scattered. So things like how to focus, right? I've got a video about that, link down below. Things like how to focus can be important because they can help you to learn how to be more adaptable as a side effect. Furthermore, it is important to recognize that you can actually learn to enjoy things perhaps more than you do already. This is something I learned a lot about from the book Flow, which I talk about all the time. But if you read the book, you'll find real life examples of people who have managed to take adverse or at least boring situations and have adapted to them by making them more enjoyable. So the example given in the book, one of many examples, but the one I'm going to talk about today is that of a factory worker who managed to make his job less monotonous by turning it into a kind of game. He had some very repetitive kind of tasks to do, like making some small device on a construction line. And many other people in his situation would have become very bored. But what he managed to do was turn it into a kind of game and thereby create more enjoyment and satisfaction from the process. Now, having this kind of job might not be fulfilling for very long, but let's say you're in a job like that at the moment. If you're able to adapt in this kind of way by using the kind of techniques that he talks about in the book, you'll be able to get more enjoyment out of it while you're actually in the job. And this means that, yes, in your spare time, you can try and search for a new one, but while you're there, you can get the most out of it while you're in that position and can't move to the next thing quite yet. So this is an example of adapting, not by changing a situation, but changing your attitude and approach towards it. There is something, of course, to be said about adapting by actually changing the situation itself. So an example that came up in my own life was having a job with quite a lengthy commute. I hadn't really anticipated what the effects of having a long commute would be for me. And one of the ways in which I adapted to the lengthy train journey was deciding to read pretty much every day. I ended up reading often when I got a seat on the train, taking notes from the books. The point here is that I took the situation. I've got a lengthy commute. I feel like I can't really use it productively. And I said to myself, okay, well, while I'm here, what can I do to change this? How can I adapt in terms of my habits and in terms of my daily routine to make this a more productive and or enjoyable experience? And it actually worked. I've got through quite a few books through my daily commute now. And this is just an example of where changing the situation itself is probably optimal. Many situations require that you change your attitude towards the situation and change the situation in some way as well. So next, I want to talk about learning from experiences. Learning from experiences as you go can help you to make better decisions in the future. And this is because once you start to extract the lessons from your past experiences, you can use those lessons to take proactive means to try and avoid these kind of more negative situations in the future. One thing I learned from having the long commute is that long term, I want to set up my life so that I don't have an enormously lengthy commute. And this is going to require planning. So I have to plan where I want to live, what kind of job I want to have, and how I can ensure that the time it takes to get from one place to the other isn't quite as long as it has been recently. There are numerous ways in which you can kind of take hold of this learning from your experiences process. So one specific method that I've used is journaling. Many people find some form of journaling useful because it can allow them to reflect on the day or the month or the week or whatever it is and try and draw out the most important information from there. You can learn more about what you want and what you don't want in, say, your career or your living situation or whatever it is. And over time, you can begin to notice patterns, things that crop up every once in a while and maybe quite frequently. And then you can make plans based on these observations. So one way of doing this is actually by going back through your journal entries and trying to sift through it for patterns where you notice that, oh, I wrote down that I enjoyed activity X this day, and this came up again on another day, and there's another one from back here as well. So maybe I should try and bring more of activity X into my life. Noticing these patterns can help you to make changes because it just gives you more awareness of what's actually been going on. One thing to remember with respect to things like the journaling is that there isn't necessarily one perfect way of doing things, right? Everybody's different. Everybody has different techniques which may work better or worse for them. And it can be useful in these situations to experiment, right? Why not try and create your own method? That's what I've done, and it works really well for me. I'll link down to my video about how I do journaling in the description, but to be honest, the important thing is to think about how you could use this or something like this to try and enact a similar kind of change in your own life. In conclusion, being adaptable is important, and learning from experiences can help you to engage appropriately over the longer term as well. That is pretty much it for today. It is quite hot in here with these hot softbox lights that I have on me, but I hope you've enjoyed the video, and I will see you in the next installment of this series. Peace.